So this title, Preparing for Death with Confidence and Compassion. Confidence and compassion. So I'd like to welcome everyone in person here and also in Zoom. And there was a question about, it's 7 to 9, the class tonight. So for those of you in the Zoom room, is it too much? Is 2 hours too long for you to sit? Do you want a break in the middle? Or, okay,
yes, that would be great. Just a 5-minute break.
Yes, because what sometimes happens is you lose people when you take a break.
Oh, okay.
I kind of prefer to just go for the 2 hours. If you guys need a break, then just take a moment, and if that's okay, because it's one thing I found. Do you feel like would you like a break in the middle? People here? I think sometimes it's particularly this course, it kind of rides through. So if you're okay to, if that's okay, I appreciate. So it's funny that, I asked and they were like, half of them went, we don't need a break. And the other half went, we need a break. So I was like, okay. So thank you very much. I appreciate the patience and okay. And I just want to check on. Okay, I just want to find this one text I'm using tonight. Okay, here it is. So let's take a moment to set our motivation. And what motivation's a lot about for me is directing your awareness in a more positive way. And what I find what happens now is, and you can notice with your own mind, is even waking up in the morning or at other times, and our energy and our concentration gets distracted by so many things. There's so many distractions. Right? So a lot of people have phones and tablets and computers and well, there you are. How are you? Good. So good. It's so hard to see people with the mask on. There she is. That have computers, different things we're sifting through. And the mind is all over, right? We're all over the place. So with a motivation, you can bring this up any time of the day. I had a motivation waking up in the morning, okay? But through the day, and if you want to leave yourself little reminders, whether it's a Post-it with motivation or whatever speaks to you about motivation, to check your mind through the day. So you're having a problem with a colleague, something happens, or you're driving and you almost hit somebody, or and you notice the agitation, you notice what comes up, whether it's fear, whether it's I don't really want to work with this person, this is challenging, or you even get excited, overly excited about something. So the mind's not really stable and balanced. So then I can kind of come back and go, and then, through some basic mindfulness practice, what's happening here? You can do it. You always have a moment in the day to have a little, just look at your mind for a moment. I've been at business meetings where I'm sitting around a conference table and noting somebody fighting over a budget and how something comes up for me where I'm not happy with this, but then I can kind of stop and look at it. So I think some of you can do that where you're just observing for a moment. For instance, observing, oh, there's irritation in my mind. But I'm not getting irritated. I'm not going to let it get to anger. I'm not going to start adding judgments about this person, or, I'm not increasing the story. The story is inaccurate anyway. We talked about that last night. The story is a bit inaccurate anyway. So this way with the motivation, I can just observe first. Okay, mind might be like, mind not so in balance. Okay, my morning motivation was to try to become a Buddha quickly, to try to reach a place where I'm fully awake. Why? So I can benefit all living beings. That's my motivation in the morning. Right now, I have a feeling in my heart, You could say at this meeting, right? Somebody's irritating you. I want to benefit all living beings except this jerk, right? But that's not really the Mahayana tradition. It's all living beings, especially this person. So it rebalances the mind. You take charge of your mind in that moment. You take charge of your mind rather than letting the distractions mow you down, letting your delusions take control of your mind. Right? Delusions are just clouds passing through your mind. It's not the nature of your mind. So let's take a moment, just close your eyes for a moment. I'd like you to just reflect right now, wherever it is you are, right this moment. How you're feeling. What you're just observing simply in your mind right now. If you're noticing something positive that you like, great. You can actually enhance that experience by setting a good motivation. If you're challenged by what you're observing, you can shift that to something more positive by setting a good motivation. And the motivation we're often focused on in this tradition is about quickly reaching that fully awakened state, becoming a Buddha quickly. Buddha means fully awakened being. But the real reason, the real goal is to benefit all living beings, to perfectly serve unlimitedly all living beings. If you like that idea, feel free to roll that into your motivation right now. And just take a moment to direct that intention in a most positive way. For those of you familiar with Refuge, we take refuge in the Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, the three jewels of refuge. Just think about in your heart, those of you connected to that, drawing from your heart a connection with this ultimate source of protection, protecting you from more suffering. This is the door through which the teaching is entered, our refuge, finding shelter with them rather than finding coping mechanisms, limited individuals that don't really benefit us in the long term. So Patty, thank you. She has the refuge up, and we're going to go in the gold prayer book if you're here. It is on page, is it page 98? Thank you. Not in this book. Let's see. No, I have it here somewhere. Just what page is it? Oh, it is. Okay, this must be an old one. That's okay. I'm going to use this copy. I'll use this copy, but thank you. So really trying to feel that in your heart. Think about the words, the meaning of the words. We'll do it twice in the English, and then we'll chant it in the Tibetan phonetics. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. O Sangye Chodanso Kicho Namla, Janchu Bardu Dagni Kyap Suchi, Dagi Chinyingi Peso Namki, Drola Penchu Sangye Druparsho. So I will talk about also some practical applications for the death time, but this is a slightly different course than the Discovering Buddhism Death and Rebirth course, which goes through traditionally explore the 6 reasons, the 6 disadvantages when you never think about death, the 6 advantages to thinking about death, the 9-point death meditation, other ways to think about death, change, impermanence, stuff like that. Okay, so I think some of you have done those courses as well. This is a course we devised with the New York Center some years ago. I did teach a series for them on this. So I'm going to give you kind of a synopsis of, and I'm using a Lojong text, Lojong is mind training. Lo is mind. Zhong, transformation, transforming your mind. So this is sometimes a higher level practice, Lojong. Okay, and we have standard Lojong texts are the 8 verses of mind training, the 7 verses of thought transformation, like that. And there's a beautiful lineage of, talks about, the Lama that found this one shred of a scrap of one of the texts that said, offer the victory to others. And he went and he thought, what an amazing teaching. Like, so think about this. If you are having issues with people, if we have delusion, we're going to have issues at times with people, right? So, and you have a fight with somebody, you have a disagreement. You just disagree with people, but it creates strife in your relationship, if that's what it's in, strife in your family, friends, community, with a coworker. People get dug into there and invested in their view. So last night we talked a little bit about view. We'll talk about some of that on Saturday as well. And until you have a direct perception of emptiness, the nature of reality, your story, your view is always wrong. But we get very invested, our ego's caught up in that. Okay. So what happens is with Lojong mind training, this was the famous verse in the 8 verses is offer the victory to others. It's quite radical because people say, but I didn't do anything wrong. This person's blaming me. It diffuses delusion. It diffuses hostility on the planet to offer the victory. So it might be that you didn't actually physically do anything wrong with this person or emotionally, okay? But the karma was created that they're disturbed by you. They're upset about something. So karma, again, it could be imprints you made in this life or imprints you made in past lives. Buddhism talks about reincarnation, as a belief in reincarnation. So as a result, what I've done sometimes, and I remember we had people come to one of our retreat centers to rent cabins. This happens all the time. One woman stayed for 3 weeks. Our staff there was really, really good at the time. And she stayed 3 weeks. There were continual problems with her every day. Something about the food. Then she gave somebody money to buy vitamins for her, and they got vitamins and it was the wrong kind of vitamins. And then she was upset about the noise in her cabin, even though it was deadly silent. And then something with the water, and then something about where the refrigerator was, and something with, you get the idea. So at the end of 3 weeks, she stayed. And at the end of, and the staff, we had staff meetings every week. So they would tell me, we would discuss what was happening, how we could better support her. So I knew they were doing a really good job. At the end, she demanded to talk to the director who was me, and didn't want to talk with anyone else. And so I met with her. I said, sure, I can talk to her, And the staff was a little tweaked because it's like going around them. Like they did everything they wanted, but now she has to kind of report in and complain about them, but it's okay. So she came into my office, and she explained a little bit, and then I just, from my side, sincerely apologized. I didn't personally think we did anything wrong, but some negative karma was there for the center, our community, all the staff people, myself, like something. I acknowledge that. Tibetan Buddhism is everything comes from your mind. We talked about that last night. Everything comes from your mind. So I sincerely apologized to her, really meaning it. And what happens is she wanted to fight. She had it. That's how she goes through space. She complains. She has this thing. She just wanted to tangle. If I kept insisting, we didn't do that, you complained about this, it would just give her fuel to continue. So just in that trajectory of how sorry I was, it kind of took the air out of her sails, the wind out of her sails. So she was I remember her sitting in the chair kind of like, she didn't know what to do at that point. Like, how do you continue a fight when somebody's like, I'm so sorry that we did not hold up to what you had expected of us. I'm so sorry it didn't work out for you. So, I said it a few times. And then I said to her, I'm happy to give you a full refund. 3 weeks, it was a lot of money for us. Like we really needed the money, but I just thought, offer the victory, let it go, right? Totally diffused her whole scene. And she sat there and she said, and suddenly she completely dropped her story, totally dismantled her whole, and she just said, oh, that's so kind of you. And I said, well, if that would help, and then she started saying, no, I was here for 3 weeks. Then she started kind of backpedaling the story. It really wasn't that bad. It really wasn't, I really like your cook. He's a nice guy. It was the first positive things we heard from her in 3 weeks. So again, think about offering the victory, but you have to be genuine. Not that you necessarily did anything wrong, but I knew that some karma was created, that we all had a part in creating it. Some negative karma got created. I was a part of it. Our staff was a part of it, community. I'm sorry for that. And I didn't say to her, I'm sorry that maybe at some point something got created that we disturbed you, but I'm sorry it was like this for her. That. So then at the end, somehow we started connecting, talking, found things we had in common, right? At the end, she's making a donation to the center. No, she goes, I don't need my money back. Here, let me write you another a donation. Offer the victory. So that was such a famous quote. When he tried to find the Lama who wrote that, he found the little scrap of paper, offer the victory. By the time he got over to find that Lama, Geshe Langri Tangpa, he had passed. So one of his disciples said, I'm so sorry you missed him. He checked out, he passed away. And then Geshe Chikawa went on more motivated from that. And then he created the 7 verses thought transformation. So those are 2 main Lojong texts. What I'm talking about right now is instructions on turning suffering and happiness into the path to enlightenment. Instructions, and this is from, I never know how to say it, Geshe Do Drukchen. It's a very famous text. It's one of Lama Zopa Rinpoche's favorite Lojong texts. There's many Lojong texts. What we're normally familiar with is the 8 verses, 7 verses. I really like this one. It's very, very special. And it relates to death and how we think about our lives on the planet. So I just wanted to look at a little bit of this. Then we'll talk about more practical applications when people are dying, when you're dying, how do you get ready? So it sounds kind of, when you say turning suffering, turning happiness in the path, okay, that we like to be happy. So we'd like, if we're on a spiritual path, I want to have joy on the path, and I want to do this, and I like spiritual communities. We come to centers and we want to have a good time. Okay, what happens when suffering comes? So I find it's even more powerful when suffering comes, as far as transforming your mind. And think about it. So, and what I do notice, and some of you are familiar with this, is when things get really hard for you and you're having a really rough time, some people, that's when they get religious. I've noticed people when, and you've seen this with churches and synagogues, that's when people suddenly, their wife got cancer, so now they go to church. Now they want to consult with the rabbi. Suddenly, they never normally go, but somehow they got fired and they got sick. Their kid is sick. Now suddenly they realize they need something beyond their own coping mechanisms. Okay? So I've noticed when I was living in Vermont, running a center there, Milarepa Center, as soon as October, November came around, the light starts changing. We know we're going to have a long, hard, cold winter. And all of a sudden, the phone calls at the center started to go up, people wanting help, depression, anxiety, alcoholism, things like that. So again, it happens when the beginning of the pandemic, the first year, the number of calls and emails I was getting from people really freaked out about trying to manage their minds. Let's take control of our minds. Let's manage our minds. We're all going to die. It's inevitable. It's coming. Okay. So this text starts with a homage to the Buddha of compassion. He who is always happy because of the happiness of others and extremely distressed by the suffering of others, who has achieved the quality of great compassion, he renounces caring about his own happiness and suffering. Okay. So the Buddha of infinite compassion, Avalokiteshvara, is how he opens. And normally there's a homage at the beginning of all these commentaries or texts written, a homage to whomever that particular being who's writing it feels more connected to, like that. So he says, I'm going to write a brief instruction on accepting happiness and suffering as the path to enlightenment. It's the most priceless teaching in the world and a useful tool for a spiritual life. So what he's normally breaking things down to is a way to look at dealing with happiness and suffering through a relative truth, and the way of dealing with happiness and suffering through what's called an ultimate truth. Last night, we talked a little bit about emptiness, and there's two truths. Okay, so there's a conventional reality or relative, and there's an ultimate reality, emptiness of everything. The conventional relative reality is we are sitting in a room together. I could say, I am sitting here in front of a computer talking with you like that. I, who am merely labeled on my body and mind, is how that I arises, how Amy arises. Independence on my parts, body and mind. Independence on causes and conditions. My parents wanted to have another child, right? And independence in the most subtle, highest school is my mind, Amy, labeled on, okay? Labeled on a valid basis of designation, okay? My body and mind. Like that, then Amy comes into being. There's no concretely existing Amy that will go on for all time, unchanging, independent of those causes, conditions, parts, a mental label, like that. There's nothing concretely existing like that, but that's the way we think we exist. So we're going to look at some of the happiness and suffering through that ultimate reality as well, as much as we can, and in relation to death, okay? So you look at accepting suffering as a path to enlightenment by means of a relative truth, okay? In the text, it says, reject the state of mind of exclusively desiring not to have suffering. Let's think about that, desiring not to have suffering, okay? You know you're going to die, okay? But what we do is we end up denying it all the time. I don't want to think about it. We know people like this. I don't want to think about it. Don't talk to me about it. Years ago, talking with my mother to try to find out, I didn't really know what she wanted. And this is a healthy thing some of you have already done or are doing with aging parents. If you're taking care of aging parents, sometime if you can try to have that conversation with them if they don't have their papers ready, okay? Because what happens at the end if they don't have their papers ready, and God bless, my mother ended up through a fall having a very bad stroke and was incapacitated for 7 months until she died, not able to speak. So if I didn't know before that what she wanted, we're guessing. We're guessing, do you think she would have wanted this? Did she want this? So you have to find an appropriate time to have that conversation. It has to be an appropriate time. So what happened is there were times my mother didn't want to hear about it, okay? But my grandmother was alive, her mother, who lived to be 99, right? And my grandmother, at one point, my mother had asked her, because the doctor said, you know what she wants. And my grandmother was pretty direct. So my mother and her had a conversation. My mother said, yes, she said, whatever means possible to keep her alive. So we were clear, at least we knew. So when she was dying, my grandmother, and it was just old age, right? And the systems just wear out. So her body was kind of just shutting down normally, where there's suddenly the kidney function changes, things, she was still conscious a little bit, and she was in and out of the hospital. And the doctors, were saying, what does she want? My mother said, she wants whatever means possible. So then my mother was in consultation with my brother and I, discussing and the doctors, things were moving along rapidly. So the discussions came: oxygen, do you want an IV? Do you want a feeding tube? These are decisions that have to be made. And if you don't know the person's wishes, it's really, really difficult. What do they want? So with us, it was easy, we knew. So after that happened and my grandmother passed, a few weeks later, my mother was talking about it and saying, well, I'm so glad we knew what she wanted, and that she seemed to have a really peaceful death. There didn't appear to be much strife, and living to 99, and she had very good care, and so then suddenly there was a pause. My mother stopped, and I said, I know, that's why I'm really interested in what your wishes are, because I'd like to do the same thing for you. I want to make sure you have exactly what you want, and then she just told me what she wanted. So very easy at that point. And then it was easier when she was incapacitated suddenly, and we could just step in and do whatever she wanted. So, but what happens with death is we deny, okay? So here we have this mindset, is you have to get rid of the mindset, okay, that doesn't want to have suffering. Okay, this is again more advanced teachings. People go, I don't want to suffer. No, you don't want to suffer. But the thing is, this is samsara. This is samsara. And what we're trying to do, samsara is a Sanskrit term that means to cycle, to turn. We're turning through suffering: birth, old age, sickness, and death. All of that is suffering. Okay, but we deny it. And how many of you, I don't know, are you spending time trying to fix samsara? How many people trying to fix samsara? So yeah, absolutely. Everybody in the Zoom room's got their hand up. Okay, trying to fix samsara. I mean, and it's unbelievable, because we tell ourselves these tales, and other people tell the tales to us, and we get influenced by that, get brainwashed by that. And you hear people, as soon as my son goes to college, everything's going to be great. As soon as I get the new car, get the car fixed. As soon as I get the new job, as soon as I move, as soon as I deal with that medical thing, everything's going to be fine. And then what a surprise, there's another medical issue, another problem with the car. I move, now I have a problem with the neighbor. I change jobs, now I have a problem with this coworker. It's endless. It's endless, and samsara won't end. So kind of let that go. But don't give up getting out of samsara. You can permanently get out of samsara. Okay? So, and we have to build that path. We have to construct that path for ourselves. I know it's not easy. Here we go. So if you can somehow adjust your mind in a way of, and some of my friends, some that have been at this for a long time, will, you compare notes with your Dharma buddies, your brothers and sisters, and you'll, about whether it's an initiation, or were you at that teaching with His Holiness when he talked about that. And so one friend I hadn't seen in many years, and we got back together, and I said, how's everything going? And he said to me, and more it was like, how's your family? What are you doing? What are you up to with work? And then he said, I'm really starting to welcome problems. Remember he said, and this is the way Dharma practitioners kind of, I'm really starting to welcome problems. And I looked and I said, okay, that's impressive. Like that's a big step because normally we don't want suffering and problems. So can you look at letting go in your mind? Okay. So if you can remedy the suffering, okay, you don't need to be unhappy. This is from the text. If you can't remedy it, then what's the point of being unhappy? His Holiness the Dalai Lama quotes this a lot. Okay, so think about your own life. So if there's suffering that comes in, without denying it, you look at what can I do about it, and you take action, but with a balanced mind. Then I realized sometimes there's nothing I can do about this. Somebody gets adult onset diabetes. Well, you got it. Usually you can't get rid of it once you've got it. What do? Well, you regulate your diet, you get exercise, you might have to take some medication. That's it, like that. So then why should I worry about it if I'm doing what I need to do? Okay. But this is the great harm. It goes on in the text. Okay, there's a weakness of considering suffering as something unfavorable. Think about that, a weakness of considering suffering as something unfavorable. I mean, this is adverse to our complete society. American society just needs to be pleasurable. We can't deal with one little poke of the pen, okay? Number two, the great harm of considering suffering as something unfavorable. How do I adjust my mind? How do I adjust my mind? Okay. So if you don't feel anxious, your strength of mind can help you to bear even greater suffering easily. Okay. You can feel light. The suffering can feel insubstantial like cotton. Okay. But anxiety about it, okay, makes even the smallest suffering intolerable. Okay. And I give an example. So I'm now at the third retreat center involved, working for the third retreat center in my life. One was Vajrapani in California, then Milarepa in Vermont. And now I'm at Land of Medicine Buddha back in California. And, you know, I'd like to say 3 is the charm, but this center is even more staggering as far as sorting it. I'm not the director of the center. I'm the chair of the board, which was under duress. I didn't want that job, but we have a really good board, working very harmoniously together, very, very good people. It's very difficult. There's a lot of budget issues, great expense to support the center. And one of the things that's happened is this past year, as you know, in California, there's terrible fires. So our insurance carrier that also insures Milarepa Center in Vermont, and very good insurance carrier, many of the insurance carriers supporting these big retreat properties in California, they've all dropped the property insurance for these centers. We can't, and so they said, we're not insuring you anymore. Property insurance. Liability we have. We don't have property insurance, which you need. And then we have a mortgage against the property, which the last 2 properties I was running did not have mortgages. They were paid off, right? So there's a mortgage, and if you have a mortgage, your lender's going to say you need to have a certain level of insurance if I'm going to insure you, right? So if I'm going to, you know, hold your mortgage, and the level of insurance is kind of staggering that they want us to have covered. So we had a good policy, and maybe it cost, I can't remember, but it might have been between 25 to 40,000 a year. Okay, which still seems expensive, but it's 108 acre property. Okay. So when I was first in California, it was 7,000 a year at the other property. And then it went up in 1 year to 21,000. So now we're between 25 to 40. Okay, we could do that. But then what they did is that's gone. We're exploring several other companies. Our carrier said, I'll help you find somebody. We're looking. I've contacted several other retreat centers in the area. And one property had $15 million of insurance, and they had to drop it to 10 million. Right? And 10 million, do you have a guess what that costs a year? Anybody? 10 million? $300,000 a year. So, you know, these are nonprofits. Thubten Kunga Center knows what you're paying a year. And this is not residential Thubten Kunga Center. You're renting a place, you know, but the property that owns the property is trying to buy it. $300,000 a year is not a possibility for us. Okay, so we're looking at something less, but this is staggering. Okay, so what happens is I can get anxious, and the board can get anxious, and when you get anxious, first of all, you're not breathing properly. Shallow breathing creates more anxiety. It also blocks my mind when you're breathing like that. You can't think clearly. If you can't think clearly and you have the additional stress, it can be a little hard working with other people. You know, and somebody says the wrong thing and you get kind of sensitive and you go, what do you mean? You know, they didn't mean anything, but you misinterpret. And then you say something back to them, and then they say something rude to somebody else. And, you know, even if you're Buddhist, okay, because you're Buddhist doesn't mean you're a Buddha. Okay, you're a Buddhist. It means you're a sentient being, you're trying. Sentient being means you have delusion in your mind and you're going to make mistakes. Sometimes the mistakes come out of your mouth and hurt somebody else. You don't intend that, but it happens. It happens all the time. I was always wary when we were hiring people at these centers. People project a lot of stuff onto Buddhist centers. So a lot of positive kind of woo-woo stuff. So people would come and we'd interview them. And I'd say, what's your interest in working at this retreat center? Well, I want to work at a really peaceful place where everyone gets along. And I'd be like, take it down the road. And they'd be so surprised. But again, we allowed people to work with their stuff, where if you go into IBM, you can't really bring your personal things in. And, so we would allow people to have their delusions come up and talk about it and work with it. And that's what's brilliant about centers. You can do a lot of work there on your mind, positive work. So what I notice is, instead of getting, here's a problem, oh, we have a problem, we have a problem, we have a problem, I'm kind of now like, oh, we have a problem. This center, I have to say, the center that I'm at right now, I've been there just 6 months. I've known the center for years. I've been going there for years, but 6 months is their, what was I just going to say? It's got probably, of all these centers, and I'm a touring teacher, as you know, for the FPMT, so I've seen so many centers, many other retreat centers in other countries, and this one to me has probably some of the greatest benefit I've ever seen, greatest potential of a center, of what, there's shrines, there's temples on this property, there's incredible statues on the property. There is a replica of the Mahabodhi Stupa in Bodh Gaya on the property being built right now. I walked up the hill, I've seen it under construction, but the top has emerged now. And I walk up the hill and I'm just like, I'm going to be living in a property with this replica of the Mahabodhi Stupa in Bodh, which is a really holy place to me in Bodh Gaya. And I've spent a lot of time there and I love it there. So now it's just up the hill from where I live. There's things like this on this property. It's a special property, could have a monastery or nunnery in the future. It could be a place of universal education that Lama Yeshe wanted it. So it's going to have bigger obstacles. So I'm kind of like, oh, well, bigger obstacles will just blow out some of the obstacles. This just happens to be a hurdle. The insurance, we'll deal with it. We're dealing with it now. So a different way to shift the mind. And here's what you also want to do. If you have the suffering comes, if you're resisting the suffering all the time, that's how you're going to go through your death experience. No, first you don't want to talk about it. Then you're angry about it. Then you're depressed about it. Then you can't deal with it. Then your mind isn't ready. Okay. No, it has to be like, death is coming. Suffering will come. Problems are there. This is samsara. How do I want to be? I want my mind open and spacious. Why? Because then I can directly deal with this problem. I can see all the different facets of the problem, the best way to work it out. The more you practice, I have compassion and wisdom in working with the problem, more spaciousness if I'm working with other people. That's what we need to kind of do. Instead of like problem, suffering, no, I'm just going to retreat. I'm going to shrivel up and go away, or I'm going to snap somebody's head off. It's not going to work. So again, can we look at the harm? Just think about it for a minute. The harm of considering suffering as something unfavorable. Let's use it in the path. Why? It transforms your mind. Transforms your mind. Okay. So what I did notice in my serving these centers, and this is just one example, serving centers, you're all doing, some of you are doing incredible work. I know some of the vocations some of you are doing. Quite extraordinary, right? So there's going to be problems that come up. Can I use it to transform my mind? My particular experience of running these retreat centers, for me, always the first year was really gunky. It was really hard at both of the other centers. So I'm kind of like 6 months through and I'm going, this is par for the course. This is not a big surprise, okay? But what I noticed at the first center, and I resisted being the director in the beginning, and I didn't really want to fill that role. And it was really hard the first year. The second year was still hard, but it was a little easier. The third year was a little easier. The fourth year, after 4 years, and I was the director about 8.5 years, then it was like a well-oiled machine. And we just, the staff were happy and things. But what I noticed is in taking on the suffering and the problems at times, and there were still problems, even the second half of it, there were still things that went on, is in using it, when I came out and finally was able to resign from the director thing and did a longer retreat. Not that I'm any greatly realized being, I'm not, right? But I could see shifts, positive shifts in my mind, like really significantly. So I was really like, huh, like I noticed with this person, I'm not getting as irritated anymore. This thing is calmer, or I have more spaciousness. I was also able, I had a bigger capacity to help people because Lama Zopa Rinpoche kept throwing more projects on me. You know? And part of me would say, the initial thing was, no, I can't do anymore. No, I can't do it. You know, and then I kind of retreat for a couple of days and then I look at the project and go, well, maybe I can, you know, get some of it together, and then you move along. What happens, and that's the role of the qualified guru. You're like a rubber band, okay? And you're about here. You know, some of us start here and you go, I don't want to do that practice. And, you know, you find spiritual practice, you start stretching. You want to get this open, wide open, heart space, bigger, right? And then they throw in another project and you go, no, this is as far as the rubber band. And then you, a little bit more, more capacity. Qualified guru. Yeah. A qualified guru meaning a really authentic teacher. In the guru devotion courses, I'm not going to go heavily into that because it's a whole other course, but in the Lam Rim, under the guru devotion section, there's a list of 10 qualities. If you're looking for a teacher, it's very good to check the 10 qualities of what you're looking for, what kind of person you're looking for, like that. It's really helpful. And there's teachers on different levels. You have your Dharma teacher, but then you might have a teacher you take Bodhisattva vows with. And then if you have a Vajra guru who you take tantric vows with, it's slightly different qualities, but related to the 10 main qualities like that. Okay, so just think about just using in your life about not having suffering as something unfavorable, and think about that weakness they talk about of thinking as suffering of something unfavorable, okay? We can also use happiness, developing the attitude of being happy, you ready? That suffering arises. This is a big state of mind. Okay? It's a practice of cultivating joy when suffering arises, okay, by regarding it as a support to your path to enlightenment, okay? To apply this practice to your life, whenever suffering arises, you want to have a training, you want to have some sort of training in virtuous practice according to the ability of your mind. Otherwise, if you have just a theoretical understanding, you'll think if I have a certain skill means to apply, the suffering could bring this or that benefit. Then it's difficult for you to achieve the goal, okay? The goal's farther, they say, than the sky from the earth. But again, you want to have, according to your ability, some sort of virtuous practice, okay? So you're welcoming suffering. You're finding happiness in the suffering. It sounds bizarre, finding happiness in the suffering. There are people, when they're dying, trained practitioners. Okay? If you're trained in Tonglen meditation, it's a very powerful meditation, Tonglen meditation. If you're trained in Tonglen meditation, giving and taking, where you are imagining beings around you, however many you want to find, I'd like to take their suffering in through visualization of light rays, images that represent suffering as I breathe in, okay? Doesn't harm you, okay? But you visualize at your core a constricted knot of all your self-cherishing. Let it harm that, because that's the only thing that disturbs you. It's your self-cherishing, okay? So you're breathing, you're inhaling, could be different colored light rays, whatever represents purification to you, taken, or whatever represents that suffering, let it chip away, the constricted knot at my heart. As I reduce my self-cherishing, I'm more spacious, happier. So now I want to offer, as I exhale, to whomever I'm thinking about, right? All the happiness and bliss in whatever images represent that to you, or whatever light rays represent that to you. Okay? So if I train myself in life right now to do Tonglen meditation, especially when I'm suffering, especially when I'm unhappy, why not use that as a resource? Because I do know people when they were actively dying, practitioners, and they didn't do a whole lot of practice in life. Like they were good people and they did some courses and they did some things, but they didn't really have a way to meditate on emptiness when they were dying, which is phenomenal. They weren't really merged with that yet. They didn't, they had, and one of them was just like, okay, wait, what was the Tonglen meditation? Like nearly done, like very soft voice, because they're nearly done. Can you just refresh me? And then, describing it to them. And then they're like, okay, got it. Because why? They're dying anyway. They may have a lot of pain and dying. If it's like a long suffering illness, right? Or whatever they're suffering with, but they're still somewhat tiny bit lucid. So they're suffering anyway. They have the intention in my suffering, right? Let me just take all that disease from everybody else on the planet because I've got it. I have this disease. Can't do anything about it now. It's killing me. I'm going to die from it. So why not if I just have the thought to take on other suffering in this moment for me right now? And whatever joy I've had in my life, I'm just going to give it away and offer it to them. If you died like that, I'd say very good. Very, very good. So it's a way to use that suffering to generate joy in my heart. But again, we want to train in everyday life. Don't wait till you're dying. You want to have it familiarized in your mind. Make sense? Make sense? I know this isn't easy. This stuff is not easy. Suffering as the support of training in the mind of leaving samsara. You know, he actually says of emergence from samsara. Suffering is a support. Okay, so use the suffering to generate renunciation. I want out of this mess. We get a little bit comfortable in the West, okay, in the States. We kind of have, you know, you got your house where you're living, you got your car, you got your pets, you got your friends, your job, and there's a level of, I want to go home and have my things. It's funny where I'm living now. We have limited housing, limited decent housing at Land of Medicine Buddha. It was an old lodge from like in the 50s and even before that. It was an old lodge, and so the housing is kind of, we have rooms there, guest rooms, retreat rooms, fantastic, and a big gompa and different rooms like that. But so I'm right now in this little, kind of like a shack, but it's a little cabin and it's quite ideal. It's just a little one-room cabin, little kitchenette and bathroom, perfect, right? But one of my friends was asking and I said, yeah, you know, and it leaks like a sieve. There's no insulation. The roof is leaking and it's right in the redwoods. It's down in the redwoods. So it's very dark. And I said to a friend, I said, yeah, and you know, I'm leaving. And she goes, well, is there any danger of anything? You know, and I said, one wind could come and it could just go right down. So I'm kind of in this like, yeah, whatever, you know, may not be there when I come back. And one fire could sweep through and, you know, this isn't really the fire season, but could happen. Could happen. Okay. So you let go that for me to realize, like, even if you have a more substantial house, people have lost their houses. You don't know. Flood comes. You have hurricanes here. We have earthquakes in California and fire. It's happened, right? So, but the other thing is you're going to die one day. And, you know, frankly, for a lot of us, that kind of sucks, right? That's not something we're really looking forward to. Okay. But if you understand the mind goes on, I've got time right now to make imprints in that consciousness, positive imprints that are going to get me into a better and better and better rebirth over and over. But right now, this kind of stinks. The pandemic has wreaked havoc all over the planet. Look at the political situation on the planet. We've got a war in Ukraine right now, really sad from somebody's utter delusions, you know, mistaken notions about reality. Makes me really sad. But there's always war somewhere on the planet. It's always war. So you want to think about, first of all, big global issues going on, and then how it impacts your smaller community, let alone here. Use it to generate renunciation. I want out of this, okay? This is not about suicide. This is not about suicide at all. That's really a bad thing to do. Please do not do that. But it's more about, what do I need to adjust in my life right now to have a little bit more of my Dharma practice? What can I realistically do? Okay. You might not have your meditation practice going yet, so you can't come in and go, I think I'll meditate 2 hours a day. Is that realistic with a job, a full-time job? So figure out with your full-time job, I was talking to Anthony on the way over and somebody earlier today, figure out what kind of time, what kind of leisure time do I have around my job, around my family responsibilities, around other things, other activities. What are your priorities then? Okay, because what happens for a lot of people is the spiritual practice is down here. I got to work out. You know, I got to go to the store. I'm taking care of my mother. I've got my partner, you know, what I do with my pets, cleaning the pool. Like, you got whatever your things are. Okay, maybe can I just take the spiritual practice, pick it up a couple notches? And what I mean by that is be realistic with yourself. How much TV are you watching? Do you stream videos? Do you binge watch stuff? What is the imprint of it? What's going in? What do you just end up on your phone doing that it's another half hour went by? It's not really useful. Okay. You have to get honest with yourself. Can I borrow from those activities? And maybe you start with 15 minutes. I'm going to take 15 minutes less of that and figure out how to make a meditation space in my house, or how to sit more. I have a space already. I'm sitting. I want to use it more. I'm going to make a goal that, one Dharma book a month I read. Let me figure out what I want to read, what I want to get through. I'm going to sign up for another Discovering Buddhism class and make sure I do this many of those a year that I'm not doing now. So figure out what's realistic for you, that you will get to it. Can you, if you don't have a meditation practice, can you get to 10 minutes in the morning? And maybe you're just sitting initially without any real focus. Make that space. That's how I started. I did a meditation class, but I didn't really know how to meditate. Okay. But I decided I liked that space of sitting. It just felt good. So I moved to San Francisco, and I had a loft in this little tiny room. It was already built in. So I made a little space up top over the bed. And I'd come home from work really frustrated, working for this magazine. And I'd climb up on the loft, and I'd light a candle, and I'd just sit there and kind of let the day empty, just breathing in, breathing out. And then I'd watch the thoughts. And first they might be negative thoughts, the job and this person. Then that would quiet down. And then I could more objectively look at things. What's the problem? There wasn't a problem. I had a good job. I had enough money. I had really good friends. I had a decent place to live. There was no problem. So then I was kind of like, I have a pretty good life. And these are challenges that help kind of polish the stone of your mind. Help, keep folding in. Okay. So think about, and if there were things that weren't working, I was just getting into Buddhist practice then. So I found value in some of the teachings that I could apply to work, and also value in the teachings to kind of say, I ultimately want something better than this. I'm not going to settle for this, because there's suffering and samsara. So use it to generate, if you can, I want to get out of samsara. Use it to fuel that. Okay. A second thing, suffering is a support of training and taking refuge. I mentioned this in the beginning, taking refuge in the Buddha, Dharma, Sangha. Some of you may not have gone through a formal refuge ceremony. No problem. You do it when you're ready. It's a little bit of acknowledging Buddhism as your path. Okay. And there's a formal ceremony you can do. You can get a refuge name if you'd like. And you just acknowledge Buddhism as your path. There's a few precepts you can read before, what to keep. And that the 4-line prayer we recited at the beginning of the teachings, I go for refuge. So there's a version of that. I ask people if they take refuge with me, please recite that 3 times in the morning, 3 times at night with some feeling. So, but that's kind of the beginning of your Dharma journey. They say the sacred door through which the teachings have entered. So if you're looking at your other coping mechanisms and you're not finding that they're really working in the long run, you might say, well, I wonder what refuge in the Buddha Dharma Sangha is about, which means you need to explore a little bit of what are the qualities of Buddha Dharma Sangha. Why would it be a valuable source of refuge? Do they really work? What are they about? There's a Discovering Buddhism course on refuge that talks about that. What about using the suffering to train you as a support of training and overcoming pride? Okay? So some of you may have arrogance, haughtiness, pride. That may be one of your delusions that's stronger than others. So if you find that that's one of your things, when you suffer, it's really humbling. It's really humbling. That's why it can be helpful. I remember the first time I went to Laudo in Nepal. It's a remote retreat center near Mount Everest. I do lead pilgrimages there. The next one may be late April, May 2023. If you're interested, it's on my website, amymiller.com. You can check. So the first time I went by myself to do retreat for a couple of months, I decided I wanted to walk back. So I flew up in a plane to this little village called Lukla, and you walk a few days from there. But it's part of the Mount Everest Base Camp trek. And I heard it's a beautiful trek. So I decided I'd walk back from Laudo. Instead of the few days, it was like 7 to 8 days. And you get a bus at the end and go back to Kathmandu. Okay. What happened is it's a lot of descending. And I blew out my knees after 2 days. It was really hard going downhill. So, and I was too far from the plane to go back. So I crawled into these places. It would take me twice as long as normal to walk, limping in excruciating pain. Right. And but before that, I was like, I'm at Laudo. I did my retreat. I'm really cool. Everything's great. Now I'm going to walk back. And suddenly I couldn't walk anymore. And I'm like downing ibuprofen, like crying, tears pouring down my face, limping into these villages. Right. So humbling. So great for my mind. You know, I mean, it was challenging at first, but then I'd realize, and I'd get to one of the lodges to spend the night. You'd have dinner there, whatever, and people would go, oh, you should go up there. There's a nun that lives up in that. You see that temple all the way up? And I knew I couldn't walk there. So I'd be like, yeah, that looks nice. I can't go there. So it really taught me about like people that don't have any legs, people that can't walk, people with extreme arthritis, people in wheelchairs. Totally brought my mind like, whoa, very powerful from my mind. So you can use suffering like that. Use suffering as a purification for non-virtuous deeds. This is a big Buddhist practice. We always say this is when you are suffering, right? It's seen as a form of purification. You're cleaning out negative imprints you've made in your consciousness from past activities of your body, speech, and mind, like that. So see it as that. Now you have to be cautious how you layer that onto other people. So when we got new staff people at a center, residential center, what would happen is Vajrapani Institute's also in the Redwoods. It's a beautiful center as well, like Land of Medicine Buddha. And people would come and they might be hired like in August, July or August. They came in the summer as work study. Now we need a housekeeper, we need an office manager, great. And they're all excited in the work study. It was their first Buddhist course. They're all turned into novelty. Nice dry summer, warm, you know, and then we roll into November. They're full-time staff now, cleaning rooms and everything. And now the rain starts. Now it's muddy everywhere. It's damp. The buildings aren't heated that well. Cold, rainy, and now they're miserable. And now they get a flu and their back's hurting from climbing up to their cabin at night and lugging their laundry or whatever it is. And now they're not happy. And different things would happen. And then you'd have another staff person say to them, and they're a new Buddhist as well, new Buddhist practitioner, another staff person would say to them, really, really good purification. And you don't want to hear that. You're just suffering, right? But higher level practices, that's how your mind deals with it. Oh, this is good purification. I can hang with this because I'm purifying something. We're not masochists. I'm not talking about that. It's just that suffering's going to come up. How do you want to use it? So you can use it. You can use it. So again, you're dying. Imagine you're dying. Okay. If I am suffering right now from tremendous pain, if I'm suffering from confusion, if there's some confusion of the treatment and what they did and they gave me the wrong medicine and my arm blew up or something like that, and okay, you're cleaning something out that you're not going to carry on in the subtle consciousness to a future rebirth. Maybe you get a better rebirth out of that. Okay. But this is again really waking your mind up. Can I sustain this in my mind? Because it's scary sometimes. You work in the medical industry, you know what that's like. People get scared. They get confused. And this is one of the quotes he mentions in here. So you want to think carefully about this accepting suffering as purification, okay? With these 4 following aspects related to karma. The certainty of the process of karma, the tendency of karma to increase greatly, that you will not encounter the result of what you have not done, and that the effects of what you have done will not be wasted. So it's really helpful in the suffering when you think about karma. Karma says, if I'm suffering, I created the causes for it. Could be this life, could be past lives, but those seeds are in my consciousness. They're just coming to fruition right now. I'm not blaming myself that I'm a bad person. Okay. But if the suffering's there and the fact that we're in samsara as an ordinary being, a sentient being, okay, means that we have negative seeds in our consciousness. And they're going to ripen sometimes in suffering. Here's another one of the verses is suffering as a support to attract you to virtuous deeds. Okay. So you're suffering enough with, I had one pattern, I think, in my life, in relation to intimate relationships before I was a nun. And I got better and better with each relationship I had before I was a nun, when you don't have intimate relationships anymore. And certainly not sexual relationships, I mean. So I got better and better, but there was one scene in one relationship where we were both suffering tremendously, right? And then the relationship kind of ended. The person left abruptly. Like I remember them I ran out on the street. It was one of these dramatic, they drove away and I'm out on the street. And I remember thinking, I went into my apartment, up the steps, crying, whatever, and thinking, all of a sudden I had this, I'm never going to do it like that again. Because I had a role in it too. It wasn't just the other side, it was both. And I looked at my behavior, which was not okay. The things I had done, the days before, the weeks before, and it was a pattern. It was just, this is what I knew, this is how I did it. And I made this firm determination. I can't do that anymore. Can't do that anymore. And then I kind of chose virtue, like a better way to do relationship from then on. And I really did it. No, it wasn't perfect, far from perfect. But I remember clearly being like, I can't suffer like that anymore. I need to do it better. So it's a really powerful place for your mind when you realize you're in a certain habit. This keeps happening, whether it's a work habit, a family thing you're involved in, and you go, enough. It's a very powerful place to be. Enough of the suffering, you say. I need to find a better way to do this. Use suffering as a support for training and compassion. And we need to have compassion for ourselves. So we're going to talk about that. I think that's Thursday night talk, maybe. Okay. Taking suffering as a support for meditation, the meditation that others are dearer than oneself. This is a meditation involving Bodhichitta, the Sanskrit term for the enlightened attitude, Bodhichitta. So and use it where, because I'm suffering, and sometimes you're in a situation where a group of people and you want a certain thing and they're disagreeing, and then all of a sudden I come back to, I'm only one. There's all these other people. If I'm in a community, a Dharma community, and I'm really like, no, we need to do this. I mean, unless I feel like it's a really good trajectory for the center as the director, but sometimes I'll go, well, clearly the rest of these people don't think that's valuable. They don't want to do it. I'm only one person. Let's do what they want to do. Cherish others. So I might be suffering of like, they're all doing this to me. They're not doing it. They don't want what I want. Offer to them. Think about what they want. And I really have this, I've mentioned this before in here, my conspiracy theory. There's all these conspiracy theories on the planet, political this, and the COVID has, the vaccines have, I don't know what they have in them, the magnets, or I don't know what it is, but you've heard all the different stories. Okay. So I have a conspiracy theory too. And my conspiracy theory is everyone is trying to get me enlightened. So that, and it really works sometimes when you're especially in a group meeting, or you go to work one day, or and there's different things. You got all these patients, and you got your staff, and you got the doctors, and you got the nurses, and you've got your accounting group, the people, and so there's people that, some people are challenging, right? You got some people that are challenging. And so now I'm in a meeting with them, and we're having a tussle, not quite working out with them. And then all of a sudden I'll stop for a minute and I'll be, I was at a board meeting the other day, and we have disagreements, we have things, but again, they're very good people. And at one point I just sat back and I was watching this conversation. It was a little delicate in general. And then I just had this like really loving feeling for these people that they're so dedicated. with these great challenges, and we're really trying our hardest. And the board meets every week, sometimes twice a week. Can you imagine? Because we don't have a director. So we are the director together. We're doing it. We're about to hire a couple managers, which is exciting. But I had this heartfelt, and I was just looking around the room. Somebody else was talking, and I was looking, and I thought, yeah, they're all trying to get me enlightened. Like, how wonderful, how sweet are they? But like, it's like, so especially if you're having difficulty in a certain situation, or you don't feel like this is going the way you want, or something. And then I just back and I went, no, this is all just perfect the way it is. It's all just perfect the way it is. So your view on it, we're often saying it's not perfect the way it is. Now it's not perfect in samsara, but you can still have a view. I can still use this in a really wise way, in a really beneficial way for my practice. Okay, so I just want to pause for a moment. I can't get back to my Zoom thing. Wait, here we go. I wanted to see how everybody here is doing. Okay, so everybody's waving. They're like, we're here. It's so nice. I come back and I'm like, there they are. So I did want to ask right now, because I know it's, so it's 8:15 or 5:15, depending on wherever you are. Do you want 5 minutes? Do you need 5 minutes? Will you come back? Or, okay. 5 minutes? Okay, 5-minute break. And then we'll take some questions too. And then we'll go on with the text as well. And I want to talk about practical things in dying, things like that. I want to talk about, thank you. Yes, I was just mentioning that I would like to go over that text another time and finish it, but I wanted to give you some snippets from it. And so, but what I'd like to also do is take any questions about what I was talking about, and I want to go into some practical applications, Buddhist applications for when you're dying or when you're helping other people who are dying. Are there any questions so far? Oh, wait.
Are we going to get a copy of the text?
I could email a copy to somebody who could send it out. If there's,
Send it to Patty or Cecilia, she'll send it.
let me see if I can. Can I send it to one of you to send out? Well, will you remind me in case I forget to send out that copy of the text?
Venerable Amy, are you talking to Zoom?
I'm sorry. So sorry, Patty, would you be able to email the text out to the people in the class?
Absolutely, but I need to make sure that everyone in the class gives me their name and their email address. So they must make a list, and I will be happy to send them. I have everybody on Zoom, but I need to know who's there to be able to send it, and I will be more than happy to do
coordinate
that.
that with Patty?
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. And it's is it Margaret?
Yes.
Yes, wonderful. Margaret's going to coordinate that with you, Patty. Okay. So here's a few things I want to talk about. Yes. And please tell me your name again.
Ralph.
Ralph.
It's the notion of karma and repeating the same suffering. So you're talking about the experience of relationships, right? Repeating. I thought, well, what role does karma play in that? Where I might keep repeating the same behavior, going through the same suffering, and then maybe finally getting it by being like a dog and change behavior. What role does karma play in all that? Or is that free will?
Yep. He's saying, what role does karma play if you're in a relationship where you keep making the same mistake or repeating a certain behavior until you get it right, which changes. And he said, is it karma or is it free will?
Specifically with respect to suffering, right? That's what we're talking about. Suffering.
Okay,
So,
specifically with respect to the suffering of it. So you're experiencing the suffering again, and then you do it again and again and again. Okay. So is it karma or is it free will? What do you think? Yes. Yes. Good answer, Jack. Jack said yes. Okay. It's a good question, right? And this is a great one. This is a debatable one. Where is it karma? Is it free will? Like that. So any other thoughts on that, or what? Because some of you have had classes in karma, please. Wouldn't free will technically be karma? What do you think about that in the Zoom room and out here?
Not mutually exclusive, right?
Not mutually exclusive. They're quite evolved here in Florida, you can see, you know. Any other thoughts about that?
Well, I was voting for karma myself.
Right. I mean, very good responses, you guys, because it's very tricky in Buddhism, and people debate, do I have a choice to get out of, you know, or is it just dictated by the previous imprints? This law of karma is one of the fundamentals of Buddhism. So it's a law, whether you believe it or not, is what Buddhism says. Cause and effect. Karma literally means action in Sanskrit, action. It's the movement of your mind. So meaning when your mind shifts, and your mind exists on a gross level, a subtle level, and most subtle level, and we're not aware of the subtle and most subtle levels generally. I mean, a little bit subtle level you'll catch on retreat, on like long retreat, but most subtle is the clear light nature of the mind that you merge back with when you're dying, right? You can recognize it and meditate in that time, but most of us miss it because we don't do enough meditation on it. Okay? But the gross level of mind, we see all the time. You know, I want water. I want this. I have to leave now. I want to. You know, I mean, your mind's moving constantly, and when it moves, it activates thought, speech, and bodily activity, and all those things are causes that create results in the future. So in a sense, you could say everything's karma. Okay, but then how do you choose to participate in the karma? So I can keep suffering over and over and over and just say, well, this is as good as it gets and I don't care. And this is how I am, you know, or you can kind of hopefully that some karmic imprint pops up to say, well, this really sucks. And I've hurt all these people and I'm hurting myself. And I wonder if I can change. I wonder if anything can do anything differently. The fact that there is a Buddha, a fully enlightened being, tells you that you can perfect your mind. But again, you want to slowly have a relationship with that and that path. You know, what is it about the Buddha? What made him? What did he have to do? How many lifetimes did it take? And you notice, so if you get onto the path, and many of you, and I asked this last night, you've been around Buddhism how many years?
Oh, Lord. Been
15 years. Do you notice any benefit for your mind?
Oh, yes. Yes, that's why I'm still around.
That's right. Definitely changes in your mind.
Yes.
Gina, you've been around how many years? 13 years. Any changes in the mind? Definitely an evolution. I mean, each of you could probably say that, even if you've been around 1 year, right? There's some shift in the mind. You mentioned 2018 you came, but maybe you were practicing before? A few years before. You notice a change, benefit in the mind? So what happens is you get onto some sort of spiritual path, and if it's benefiting you, you see the changes and go, I think I can change something, like it's changing. So if I keep applying, you know, if I go to other classes, follow the advice of the teachers, get a qualified guru, do the practices, do some retreat, have a meditation practice. I said this yesterday, it's components. It's not one thing that you're going to get emptiness. You have to have all the pieces together. It takes time, but you can do it, really. You can do it.
I try to live it. I use the word living the teaching.
Right.
So each day and everything.
That's right.
Mindful of how you're reacting, what you're doing, and stuff like that.
Absolutely.
And that's what.
Is she saying she's living, being mindful of what she's doing, and through that mindfulness, the mind is transforming into something that you're shining, you're polishing the jewel, polishing, and it starts glowing. So it's how you participate in the karma. If you acknowledge and you go, wow, 3 relationships, I really kind of blew it. They ended in the same way, same kind of dynamics, same kind of issues. Maybe I can do it differently. Like, so first you have the wish, then you kind of look at your behavior. You might have a little feedback from some friends. Do you ever notice, I was accused of doing this? Do I do this? Maybe check in with them. And then changing your own behavior to become healthier overall, you start attracting healthier people in relationship. Because a lot of times we have a lot of holes in us. So I want you to fill the hole in me then I'll be whole with this person. I'm fractured, so I attract a fractured person that mirrors back things. And so if I get healthy and I'm actually okay without some sort of relationship, I'm strong on my own, then that's usually when I'd meet somebody. Or right before I was about to leave the country on an extended trip is right when you meet somebody. Because you're looser, you're not looking for it. You're more available. There's every single time before I'd meet somebody I really wanted to be, just because somehow there was a freedom. There was like this, I'm not that interested right now. I'm not available, Then boom, you meet somebody. So again, it's how healthy is my mind that can attract. And when I repeat the same things, it's certainly karma. But there has to be a willingness to change, then putting some techniques in place.
Causes and conditions. So
The
creating causes and conditions for different seeds to ripen.
That's right, absolutely. And it takes time. I mean, be patient. We all have to be patient with ourselves. And America is a very impatient culture. We have to really be patient with this spiritual path. It takes time. They have these, this really helped me of just, these are old ancient stories, okay? So Master Asanga, his guru was Maitreya. And there's a famous story of Maitreya and Asanga. And Asanga meditated for 12 years in a cave, okay? So it sounds like a long time. But anyway, he went in for 3 years. And he's like, I'm going to go in 3 years. I'm going to do this retreat because I want to see my guru Maitreya. I need to see my guru Maitreya. Okay, great. So he's in the retreat 3 years, slogging through really hard, looking at his mind. And Maitreya, he never sees Maitreya. Maitreya never comes. And so he goes, I'm done retreat. And he comes out of the retreat and he's sitting by the opening the cave. And there's a part of the little cave, there's a drip, just a drip coming from the cave. And he noticed that at the bottom, it had hollowed out, just this one drip of water over 3 years had hollowed out the bottom of the stone. And he was really, and he said, if the one little drip of water can do that in 3 years, I must be able to shape my mind, do something with my mind. So he goes in for another 3 years. Then I know I'll see Maitreya. Nothing happens, right? Comes out again and he's sitting again. I'm done with retreat, finished. And he looks up at the mountain and there's an eagle flying into its nest. He looks up and he sees that the eagle, the way it comes into this little hole, its wing has brushed the cave wall. Over and over, it's done this. Generation after generation of birds have been through this thing. And there's a little etch in the stone wall from the wing. And he says, all that time with those birds flying, the very soft feather somehow has made that little indentation. Well, maybe I can make an imprint in my mind if I go back in for 3 more years. He goes back in. It comes back out in another thing. So it's these incidences, these little moments. So after 12 years, he comes out and he's very disillusioned. And he goes to the town, walking to the town, kind of like, I'm done my retreat, and he needed to get some goods at the market, whatever. And on the way into the market, there's a dog lying on the side of the road, and it's kind of keeps turning around to try to bite its back, its hind part, like when dogs have an itch, keeps turning around. And he comes over to the dog and he sees the whole back half is infested with maggots. It's like rotting, and the dog's, affected by this. And he has so much compassion for this dog. So Maitreya represents loving kindness as well. He has so much compassion for this dog, and he goes, oh my God, I need to, and he's trying to get the maggots off. But as he's getting them off, he's ripping them and they're dying. And he goes, I can't do this. I have to. So then all he can think of is he cuts a part of his leg to get them onto the flesh, but he can't get them off, without killing them. So then he realizes, well, I can put them on the flesh, but what I'll do is I'm going to bend down. Can you imagine? I mean, it's this rotting flesh of the dog. I'm going to bend down and I will stick my tongue out right at the maggots and let them crawl onto my tongue. Talk about devotion, right? And then I'll move them from my tongue over to the flesh. Okay. He bends down to get the first one, closes his eyes, sticks his tongue out, right? And the dog turns into Maitreya. Okay. So, and he's like, you know, and Maitreya is like, you've won the lottery, you've passed the test, because he had so much, Asanga had so much compassion arising, and just instantaneously, like, I have to help this dog, I have to figure out a way not to harm the maggots. I mean, incredible heart like that to try to, so Maitreya manifests, and Asanga gets incredibly angry. And he goes, where were you? 12 years I tried to find you, now you come in the form of this dog. And he says, 12 years, and Maitreya said, I was there the whole time. Because I was the water dripping. I was the eagle brushing the rock, so it's like these messages of please be patient. It takes time to shape your mind into a Buddha mind, into something virtuous, but you can do it. But we're so impatient, and now because of social media, everything's got to be delivered. Boom, boom, boom. I really feel for the youngest generations now, that they're growing up with this thing that is constantly in the space. And so I lost internet in the cabin last Wednesday, in the cabin where I live. So I lost the internet. We do have internet at, Land of Medicine Buddha, but we've had obstacles, of course. So I didn't have internet, and I had classes I had to teach, but there's a little office I can use at Land of Medicine Buddha. It's just a short walk down, By Friday, Land of Medicine Buddha had lost internet. It was amazing. And I had all these day-long classes, but fortunately, one little office near me of this school that we have on the property, they gave me a key, and they didn't work Saturday and Sunday, so I could go in there Saturday and do this class, and and so what happened is I noticed, like, being without the internet in my cabin, it was wonderful. It was so freeing. Like, just certain things, I'd be looking at the phone in the evening at the weather or something, or looking at the news thing, and I was just like, can't get on. Just gonna read my book, gonna go back to that quiet, which we had a lot of that space before. You didn't always have to be checking, you didn't always have to be looking at your email or whatever you're doing. And so again, oh, thank you, Maureen. Yeah, Maureen's got to go help her mom. Hope all that goes well. So again, and then the end of the story is, so Asanga was so elated. He picked up Maitreya, put him, your guru, you never let their feet touch the ground, picked him up, put him on his shoulder to carry him into the market to show everybody Maitreya, because they'd heard about Maitreya, but none of them had met Maitreya, and they knew Asanga was in this cave for all these years doing retreat outside the village, and hoping that he could meet his guru and see his guru Maitreya. So he carries Maitreya in, but because of karma and because of karmic obscurations, we don't get to see the Buddhas directly. So we have, fortunately, a being like His Holiness the Dalai Lama, who manifests as an ordinary looking monk like that, and manifests in that way. And that happens to be, for a lot of us, a way that we can connect with him, that we see him as a Tibetan monk like that. We don't necessarily see him as a 1,000-armed Buddha of compassion. Some people do, if you have higher realization, some people do. But for most of us, so he carries Maitreya into the market, okay? People in the market think he's crazy because they know he's been doing a lot of retreat, because all they see on his shoulder is a maggot-infested dog, right? And there was one old woman, apparently in the market, in the legend, who was able to see, had enough karma, she could see Maitreya's feet, but the rest was the dog. Interesting. So really, if you clear those karmic obscurations more and more and more, you'll have more ability to practice well, less suffering in your life, a better way to transform suffering when it does manifest in your life, bigger heart to help other people more naturally, more automatically, right? And more happiness, bliss for your mind, and quicker path to enlightenment. So it happens, but we have to be patient with ourselves. Really have to be. Patty says one of her favorite stories, one of mine as well. Okay. Let me go back to some practical applications in the time we have remaining. And then if you have other questions. When people are dying, you're taking care of people. A lot of people ask me, they're not Buddhist, what do I do? They are Buddhist, what do I do? But there are some general things if you're caregiving people on the brink of death, they're approaching active dying, they're actively dying, what's happening? And maybe they're still lucid, maybe they're not. You might be coming in as a healthcare practitioner separate from the family. You may be coming in as a friend of the family or family, could be somebody really close to you. So that's going to have its own dynamic, is how to help. How to help. Here's one, is you don't need to hand out advice. If you want to be with somebody dying, it's not necessarily about handing out advice. That's coming from everybody. I know somebody who had pancreatic cancer, you know what they did? I know somebody who they didn't do the chest x-ray at the thing, you know what? Sometimes you just need to be there with them. Just show up. Check the room. I usually check, because I've done a lot of hospice work. When I enter the room, I just want to get a sense first. I might stand in the doorway. The family's asked me to come, but I'm not going to barge in the room. I want to kind of see who's around, who's in the room. What's the feeling in the room? Is it agitated? Is the person agitated? Are there medical people in the room needing to do stuff? I can always wait. Just get a sense of that, how you want to approach the scene. You see people, oh, hi, oh, Amy's here, or you're here, wonderful, great. They might offer you a chair. You might feel like you want to stand, and trying to be there with the person. They may be sleeping. It's okay. I might just stay in the room and pull up a chair and sit there for a while. Then they might wake up and open their eyes, or somebody might say, Amy's here, and they might, suddenly wake. But I don't tend to like to wake people if they're there. Can wait, doesn't matter, like that. So you kind of see, and so I don't need to hand out advice. I'm just coming in to be with the person as natural as you can be. It's uncomfortable for people. So the more you practice being with dying people, the better you get at it. But it can also be quite uncomfortable. Like that. What if they're in a lot of pain? Are you willing to kind of sit with them through the pain? It's really, really hard the first time. If you do it one time, it gets easier. I had this, I've mentioned this story before of, I did a lot of AIDS hospice work in San Francisco in the late 80s when it was really bad. So people were first dying within 6 months of AIDS. And then when some medications came out and they learned a little bit better how to handle it, people would live 2 years. And that was it, really all you'd get, until the medications now are developed. So I was an emotional support counselor, and I was with a guy named Rick, who was a good friend, became a good friend. Over 2 years, I would come and see him weekly and watch the decline. And his partner also was HIV positive, was terrified he was going to go through the same thing, even though he was healthy at the time. And Rick was in really bad shape. In the very end, the last couple weeks, he had incredible pain in his body that they couldn't really relieve. And so one night I came in, and as soon as I got to the dorm, was entering his lover was like, I'm out of here. And I hear Rick in the back screaming from the pain. So I didn't know what to do. I just hear this like horrible sound from his bedroom, and nobody's home but me. And I know I can't leave, So I, very clammy, very nervous. And I went in the room and I said, is it okay if I come in? And he saw me and he just nodded like this. And body was, so he kept kind of screaming, this kind of like moaning. And you kind of want to go, well, can I bring some water? Or, it sounded kind of silly in those moments. And so then sometimes you don't need to say anything. So I just stood there for a while, and then I saw there was a little space on the bed. He was on the edge of the bed, sitting up on the edge of the bed, and he had an IV, and I just said, would it be okay if I sat next to you on the bed? And he was like, he'd be like, oh, so I just sat there for a while, and I said, after a little while, would it help if I just put my hand on your back? And he would nod, and because a lot of people with AIDS at the end, their bodies was pretty bad. So nobody wants to touch them, wanted to touch AIDS patients, and other than medical people taking blood and with gloved up, and so we sat that way for about, I don't know, 30 or 40 minutes, just sat, no words, that was it. We just sat there. I was like doing deep breathing because it was so uncomfortable, and there wasn't anything I could do. He'd already taken some morphine. It wasn't working. But the thing is, everything changes. So whatever happened after 30, 40 minutes, the pain started shifting, changing. Maybe the morphine kicked in, maybe, and it subsided. He stopped moaning. And then I turned and said, would you like to get back into bed? And he nodded. And then I got him settled into bed with the IV and or whatever. He had some kind of pole with something. And you try your best. You try your best. But once I did it, it was easier again to be there with somebody else's pain that I can't fix. So just don't leave if it's possible. And he said to me, so then when I was backing away from the bed, he grabbed my wrist, and I'm like, what do you need? And he said, you didn't leave me. He said, thank you for not leaving me here. So sometimes you just be there with somebody. You don't need to say anything. Maybe just hang out there with find what's appropriate. Find what's appropriate. I tried very much not to bring in the pity eyes, that pity look people give people dying, where sometimes, I know somebody said, one of the guys was saying, I don't really want to see that woman because she comes in and it's like she's pitying me all the time that I have cancer. He goes, it just doesn't feel genuine. She's always like, oh, what are you, so see, I always tried to figure out like what's on my face, like what am I think you just be natural. There's people I know with cancer, dying of cancer, who just wanted to hear about my normal day. What are you doing out there? Have you been to the supermarket lately? Which one do you go to? They just wanted to hear ordinary things. What did you say? What's it? It's spring now. So what's blooming out there? What's blooming? Because they couldn't go out to see it. So you just want to, sometimes you just tell them what's going on. Yeah, I'll tell you what, I just took a walk down the street. It's, the big tree at the end, well, it's all out flowering, and remember how all the buds would fall on the ground and everybody would slip on them, and so the other thing is to see the ordinariness in death. There's also an ordinariness. It's not like it's something exceptional, that there is an ordinariness. And yet another time, the room can be completely chaotic. So you might come in and suddenly they're taking the chest x-ray and somebody's taking blood and they're trying to turn the person and the person's moaning. And, there's also that aspect. So sometimes it's very quiet. There's no predictability about death. And sometimes I remember my mom, 7 months in the hospital in a coma, and sometimes I come in and it was like the zoo in her room. And other times I come in just peaceful, nobody there. Never know what, you just have to roll with, because death, you don't know what's going to happen. Can you communicate honestly and talk simply with the person who's dying? They may have trouble understanding you. They may not be able to articulate. Okay. So if I'm just honest with them, and it can be hard where the first patient who died at the Tara home, which is the hospice at Land of Medicine Buddha, there's a 1-bed hospice. It's reopening right now, Tara home. My friend was the first patient that died there, and Jan, and she had ovarian cancer. In the end, when she was actively dying, like a couple of days before she died, people get confused when they're dying. They lose their way a little bit. So we would do practices around her bed that she liked. She wanted us to do, advised by Lama Zopa Rinpoche. She was very peaceful when we were doing that. And then sometimes she'd want to talk. Then she couldn't talk very much anymore. And one time she woke up and me and another friend were there, and she was very alarmed and disturbed and trying to get out of bed. And we came up to her and then she suddenly like grabbed our hands and she said, what's happening? I can't move. What's happening? What's happening? Like she kind of lost her way. And I forget who it was. One of us said to her, and this sounds kind of odd, but one of us said, kind of quietly and said, you're dying. Like and she kind of heard it, and then there's like a little startle, and then she was like, oh, right. That's right. I'm dying. Like she kind of forgot, she didn't know what was happening, and you might wake up and can't move and you freak out. So you can just calmly like, remember, we went over this, that what we're doing. And she's like, yeah. So again, honestly, but talking simply, we weren't freaking out. So with Rick, I when I went in the room and he was moaning, the deep breathing really helped so that I wasn't freaking out. Like, oh my God, like I wasn't running around the room. What can I do? Do you want another pillow? Should I call the doctor? Do you have enough meds? Do you just, there was nothing to do. So just try not to freak out. It's hard dealing with another's pain and suffering, So sometimes allowing the chaos as well. Like with my mom's room, I'd walk in sometimes, all the medical staff, they needed to do these tests, they needed to do this. There was a bed sore, so the wound guy was in there. It's like, okay, sometimes just like that. Be prepared to deal, Gina could tell you more about this, with the politics of dying, meaning there's a healthcare team. They may have conflicting things they're doing because there's not communication. Maybe there's good communication, right? There's hospital rules. So you decide you're going to have a party in the room and bring in pizza, but they're like, well, not after 11 p.m., or can you turn the TV off at this time, or we can't have visitors because you have a roommate, only one person in the room, or because there's an infection. And you have to abide by those kind of things, okay? Here's one that I find really helpful appropriately is maintain a sense of humor. Maintain a sense of humor, even in death, believe it or not. One time Rick, I came over when he was better, and I came in and his partner was there, and Rick is in the back bathroom having a terrible coughing attack. Like it sounded really awful. So, and his partner wasn't doing anything. He was like in the front bedroom, and I'm like, hi, how you doing? He's like, hi, Amy. And we're going to go in the back and watch TV. And he's in the bathroom, and the bathroom's ajar, doors open. And this, and finally I was like, this is not good. And so I knocked on the door and I said, excuse me. And I said, are you all right? And I couldn't quite get my head in the door, but I said, are you all right? And then it was getting better and better. And all of a sudden he had a very caustic personality, kind of, very funny guy too. And he pulled the door open really loudly and stuck his head and he said, no, I have AIDS. So we both laughed, like, just let it, it was great to have I've heard some really funny stories from people as well. So some other things you could do to get ready. Have you yourself thought about your memorial service or your funeral service, what you want? Seriously. So when I lead death and dying retreats, if I have longer times to lead the retreat or a death and rebirth course, I ask people over the series of weeks to plan their memorial service as some homework, right? Write your bucket list. You know what a bucket list is? Okay. So this is all the stuff you want to do before you die. Okay. But I have a second bucket list. Okay. Write a bucket list of what qualities would you like to develop in your mind before you die? What kind of spiritual endeavors would you like to have attained or completed by the time you die? Put that on the bucket list. Right? But it's really helpful to have this. The bucket list can change. You can update it. You should update it. Okay. But I find it helpful to think about the memorial service, the funeral, because it starts to put death more prominent in your mind of this is coming. This is definitely coming, like that. There's things to think about getting ready. Organ donation, euthanasia, the burials and things like that. So organ donation is a personal, as far as what Buddhism says, it's a personal decision. It's your own individual decision. There's no right or wrong to it. If you really feel many people will benefit from your body, you're a younger person especially, even though they can use older cadavers and things, but many people could live. If you feel that way and that's your heart, then be an organ donor. Some great meditators choose not to because they do need to take the organs right away. And the great meditators would prefer you're supposed to leave the body up to 3 days in the Tibetan tradition to allow the consciousness to leave. So they don't want to have anything kind of interfering. The consciousness will leave anyway, but you'd like it to be less disturbed if you're doing a meditation, that you can stay with the clear light, meditating on emptiness there. It's a personal decision, what you want to do. In Buddhism, we're not proponents of euthanasia, even with your pets. It's really hard. It's really a hard one. Now, granted, your motivation is usually very pure. But I know there's been situations where a person with cancer wanted their machine turned off. I never want to be on a ventilator. So if they have a teacher to consult with that they believe is highly realized, it's very individual for each person. I know Lama Zopa Rinpoche, an older man, had a massive heart attack and was on a respirator. And the family is Buddhist. He had met Rinpoche many times, so they asked Rinpoche, and Rinpoche said, get the family together around his bed. And when everybody's there together, say goodbye, whatever you want to do, then you can turn off the ventilator like that. You don't need to keep it going. And they did turn it off, and he lived 24 more hours like that. There was another younger man who got colon cancer and was dying. And Rinpoche's suggestion was to keep him alive as long as possible. So obviously Rinpoche must have seen better to be in this human life, letting the suffering play out, than to just take him off the machine. And so it's very individual of what Rinpoche sees and things. I remember the advice from my mother, 7 months in the hospital dying, and different advice of things like that to do. So it's quite individual. It's nice to be affiliated with a qualified, highly realized being. That can be really helpful. It's helpful to get grief counseling after a loss of a loved one, especially a sudden death or a death of a child, or a death that you're having trouble dealing with. It's good to get grief counseling for your kids or family members. It's different than normal counseling, as some of you know. And it's best to avoid suicide at any way possible. So suicide is not as heavy as killing another person other than yourself, because to have a heavy killing karma, technically the person you're killing has to die before you. And at suicide, you die at the same time. You're the person killing them, but it also cuts a really jagged slash through everybody around you, all your loved ones, everyone. I do know people with chronic illness that planned like assisted suicide, like a euthanasia for themselves. We would prefer Buddhists normally let the suffering, let it play out the way it is naturally. You may be purifying more that you're going to end up taking into another rebirth that may have you dying as a baby or a sick animal or something like that after a little while. So, but again, if you have somebody highly realized to consult with, that's the best option like that. That would be really helpful. There's a lot of practices we do. Medicine Buddha practice is one of the main things we often do for somebody sick, actively dying, even after they pass, whether you're with them or not, you can do it from afar. The mantra is really powerful. And reading a great dedication called the King of Prayers that's in this prayer book is really great. So those are at least the minimum practices I do for people. There's many other practices you can do. And Rinpoche has a thick red book on death, how to make friends with death, how to be comfortable with the death process, that has a whole everything, how to think about it. You can order it from the FPMT store or online. I think you can download it. Of all the prayers are in there, all the ways to think about death, all the ways to get yourself ready, to get others ready. The last thing I'll mention before we dedicate is have your paperwork ready. Okay, this is an example. This is called the 5 Wishes. And this is from Palm Beach County. This is a legal document, but this is legal in many states. You can use it as a guide. You don't need to use this exact thing. What I did is I used it and I took the pieces of it and put it into my computer so I could make it my own of who I wanted contacted and what the wishes, but they give you examples. So you want to make sure you have who's going to be your healthcare person. People have powers of attorney. Those are your legal papers, your testament, your will and testament, your legal papers, but you want to have a living will. So do you want to be resuscitated? Do you want extreme measures? Details are in here. So if you don't know what to say, you can cross everything out and just circle that. This is what I want. This is what I want my loved ones to know. That it's a relief for your mind when you have the paperwork ready. I actually updated mine during the pandemic because I had the time to do it. And I actually recorded all of my prayers, and they're on several memory sticks, different memory sticks with, 2 people close to me in my life. And then there's 2 Dharma practitioners that they call, because the 2 relatives of mine don't know. They said, we don't know the Buddhist stuff. And I said, in the instructions, it just says, you call these people. They agreed to fly in. They'll take care of all the rest of the stuff, but all the phone numbers of everybody I want contacted, emails are on there, and then updated every few years because things change. You might want money to go to somebody else. You might want this information. Maybe the Lama you're having has passed away. So you want to have the next person you want contacted. It's a huge relief for my mind, but make copies of the things. So it's on my computer, it's printed out, it's also on memory sticks. So this way, my niece for one is one person, but she won't know. All she has to do, she has a memory stick of my prayers, plug it in, put the earphones, the earbuds in me. I'm set. You don't have to worry like that. So it helps me at least. There could be people that a Lama designates come and do these prayers for her, but that way I can have it as long as everything's charged up, it can just be playing for me. And I feel a great sense of relief having it done now and having it updated. Make a legal document. I had to get it notarized. I had to get, to make sure that it's legal where I was living at the time. And if for me, there's no issue of anything being contested or anything. So if I move to California, it's the same instructions. But if you think there's going to be an issue of somebody fighting over your house, I don't have many belongings or money. And if they're going to be fighting over your house or something, then make sure it's a legal document wherever you're living so there's no issue like that, and give it to people that you trust to carry out your wishes. So if you have a friend, a close friend, and you don't want to be resuscitated, but they want you to be, that's going to be a problem, right? Questions, comments? I mean,
You have your prayers in your memory.
they're on audio. Yeah, so I recorded them the way I like to do them. And, because you could be dying and they're doing some prayers and you want to just go like, shut up. I don't want to, but no, it would be really great to have, like we've done many prayer sessions around people. I find it really helpful, but I just happened to record mine because living in Pennsylvania, I wasn't around any Buddhists. So I didn't know who was this way it would just be easier for my family. I would make it as easy as possible for the people around you. My sister once asked me some years ago and she's like, I don't even know what you'd want. And I'm like, get the simplest cardboard box, take it over to the crematorium. Like, you don't need to, just run it through. That's it. Make it no mess, no fuss. I want the easiest thing. I'm not going to have you, make sure you summit Everest and put my ashes up there. No, I don't need that. So, and you can also have things, I do have things about where I'd like the ashes, but it says if it's too much of a problem, don't worry, just make it easy for people. And here's another thing I would say, this is happening a lot in the pandemic, is, as you know, in this country, we have a lot of stuff, a lot of things, right? And some people were tending parents who passed away. They were selling a house, cleaning out, blah, blah, things like that. So see if you can take care of your stuff now. Don't leave it for somebody else. I had to do my parents' stuff. Their stuff's not done yet, but it's mostly done. It's just furniture in the house is left, that we can just give away if somebody, but the amount of time I've spent doing this stuff, the amount of emotional stuff you go through looking at this and that, and what are we going to do with this from my grandparents, and take care of your stuff, that it's as best as you can. I just find it's I've seen people leave masses of, 2-car garages filled, attics filled, basements filled, and the kids have to spend, or there's one child has to spend all their time, and they live across the country having to deal with it. So I helped one of my girlfriends who's an only child with her parents' condo, and she had to pay haulers to take it away. She paid 3 truckloads, $600 a truckload to take the stuff away. It's like, that's kind of silly like that. So that could be helpful to get yourself, you will feel better that it's done. Any questions or comments? You're welcome. You're welcome. So I thought I'd stop there of just some practical things as well. I hope this has been helpful. And at some point, let's go on and do the rest of the Lojong text, which is really,
Community has a question.
please.
Thank you, Lou. Venerable Amy, When we say medicine Buddha mantras for someone, I know when you do the puja, there's visualizations. Is there, when you're just doing the mantra for someone, is there a specific visualization as well? Thank you.
Yes, I do the similar visualization of the 7 medicine Buddhas. There's 7 of them. They can be piled up on somebody's crown. I'm looking for, here's technically the medicine Buddha, who's usually sapphire in color, lapis lazuli, which is a healing stone. You can have them piled up over top the person you're praying for. Sometimes I put them over the planet right now because our planet's struggling. You can also have them side by side when you're doing the puja. So one dissolves into the next, the next, the next. So what you can do is imagine them there and then dissolving, or just leave them all over like a tower, and then have that from the medicine Buddha too, inseparable with the Buddha. Just have light rays descending through the person's crown from that whole tower of medicine Buddhas, and dissolving their illness, especially if somebody's sick, dissolving the disease and clearing them of that, or just helping them to have a good rebirth and taking any suffering away like that. Yeah. So whether you do the whole puja or whether you're just reciting the mantra, same visualization like that. That when we recite the mantra in the puja, it's the same. So thank you very much. We're going to dedicate the merit. So whatever positive energy we've created, can we invest it in our being able to really embrace this path, or some sort of spiritual path that can get you to a place where you can fully, unlimitedly benefit all living beings? May we also have good deaths along the way, but more importantly, can we have good lives right now that will prepare us for death? I'd like to dedicate to all of our sisters and brothers in Ukraine. May that war end immediately, and may all the minds of all the leaders of these totalitarian regimes like Putin, may their minds be turned to Bodhichitta instantly. And for the long lives of our precious teachers, for the great flourishing of our centers, especially Thubten Kunga Center. And I'd like to really pray for our dear member of Thubten Kunga Center, Lamo, Cheryl Lamo Wagner, who passed away recently. May she be free of suffering and immediately take a good rebirth to be a benefit to all living beings. So can we share some of the dedication prayers that I thought we'd just do a few? I do have the gold prayer book in my, but we're going to go here to a few of the short, page 235 I have in this book, General Dedication Prayers. And let me see if I can bring it up on my computer, because I know I've got this prayer book there as well. Here we go. Here we go. What did I say? 235. Let's see if I can, if it's okay. Well, that worked. Okay. These are some of our general dedication prayers. Hope everybody can see. Let's read these 3 in English. Due to the merits of these virtuous actions, may I quickly attain the state of a Guru Buddha and lead all living beings without exception into that enlightened state. May the supreme jewel Bodhichitta that has not arisen arise and grow. May that which has arisen not diminish, but increase more and more. Just as the brave Manjushri and Samantabhadra too realize things as they are, I too dedicate all these merits in the best way, that I may follow their perfect example. So that particular verse 3 is a condensed version of the King of Prayers. It's better if you can read the King of Prayers. If you can read it more quickly, it takes about 10 or 15 minutes, but that's why we read that that particular prayer. Let's go to page 244 for the short, long life prayers for His Holiness the Dalai Lama and Lama Zopa Rinpoche. In the land encircled by snow mountains, you are the source of all happiness and good. All powerful Chenrei Sig Tenzin Gyatso, please remain until samsara ends. For Lama Zopa Rinpoche, you who uphold the subduer's moral way, who serve as the bountiful bearer of all, sustaining, preserving, and spreading Manjunath's victorious doctrine, who masterfully accomplish magnificent prayers honoring the three jewels, Savior of myself and others, your disciples, please, please live long. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I hope this was helpful. And I hope to see you on, is it Friday? Today, is today Tuesday? Today's Wednesday, Friday night. Wonderful. Thank you so much. Lovely to see all of you.
Thank you, Venerable Amy, and thank all the volunteers at the Gompa and for all of the people here in the Zoom. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Lovely to see all of you. Do you need to